Welcome to Marketing People Love. My name is Jacques Spitzer, and today I have an absolute treat for you with a wonderful accent, a delicious accent. Tom Spaven, he is the VP of Marketing for Reduce, and not only is he an incredible marketer, but he is one of those people that is just an electric thinker when it comes to human beings, brand, marketing, and we're going to delve into 3 different topics together, both on the front of how human beings are simple and yet so complicated, but also how we respond to comedy, why comedy works. And he's going to share about his experiences with Grey Goose and Good Wipes and so many other experiences along his journey that helped make breakthrough content. Tom, thank you for being with us. Let's get this going. So Tom, in this new series on branding, we have just been diving into a nugget or something that we found to be true as part of our, each of us, decade plus journey and branding and marketing. And I'd love to start you out with this thought that marketing is about understanding people, which I think we both agree on, and it's that simple. And yet that's what makes it hard. I'd love your reaction and response to how simple that thought is, but how complex we are. We make no sense.
We as in the marketing community.
Oh, I'm just saying people make
people. All right, yeah. It's an amazing statement, and I agree with it. And just like so many things in our industry, the concept of it is very simple, but very difficult to kind of perfect or be really good at. I'll never forget actually when I first wanted to get into marketing, and I was thinking about it probably 20 years ago. My dad, who's not a marketer at all, he just said, marketing's about people. He didn't even say understand. He's like, marketing's about people. And I was like, okay, well, I think that's a good place for me to start because, I like people. I'm interested in people. I think I understand people. And so what's so true about what you're saying and what's so painful about it is that marketing, as we know, has become increasingly scientific.
Mm-hmm.
And through obviously the incredible world of digital, which good marketers have to embrace, but I think it's become less human, and that's kind of these two forces that we have. We know it's about people because you have to connect and be consumer centric, but I think marketing has become less human, and I think that's a problem.
I'd love to ask you because I know I can think of so many stories we'll tell here in a little bit, but so many stories behind things that don't make sense and yet totally make sense with just how human beings react and think. And you've worked with a couple different brands, you've seen a lot, and I'd love to just hear about some of those experiences you have. And while you're thinking about them, I'll share one that we've had along the way, which is I think that one of the things that stands out to me is the difference between what gets people's attention and what people buy. And I'll give you a couple examples. Shinesty underwear brand. When it comes to selling underwear, they'll sell 80, 90% neutrals and blanks, but the things that get the clicks and get the buys have a huge American eagle on the crotch or a hot dog on the crotch. Same thing with like Ridge wallets. You check out their ads, base camp orange, bright red, but they're going to sell a lot of blacks, grays, because the difference between what attracts people's attention is almost more like a peacock, but what they end up buying is the thing that is more practical, 80 to 90% of the time. And that part of it is so strange because most people say, well, I should mirror back to people what our best-selling product is. And that's almost hardly ever the case. Sometimes it is, but especially with things that are more visually oriented, it's always the brighter thing. It's always the louder thing that gets people in the door. Check out Bronco ads for cars. They're always really bright car ads, really bright cars, but people buy the neutral colors. And that's an example of like, even though you would think it would make logical sense to show people what they're actually buying, it's actually the thing that attracts them in, even though they buy something else that works.
Yeah, that's a great observation. I mean, I think what you're touching on is it might be the difference between advertising and marketing. And a lot of people, obviously advertising is a big part of one of the P's of marketing. I'm a big 4 P's guy. Whereas marketing, if you think about the word in the most literal sense, you're literally like going to market, and you need to be able to commercialize your core items, which is probably the brown wallet that you're talking about. But advertising is kind of you standing up and shouting and screaming about who you are very often. And perhaps that's like a way of looking at the difference, because if you went out to the world and started shouting about your black wallet, I think, be like, well, basically you wouldn't get noticed. So that's kind of the first point. If you don't get attention, it really doesn't matter what you're saying after that. It's pointless. And you guys know this better than anyone.
Yeah.
But you have to come out and say something or communicate something about you that's interesting, and that could be your most vibrant side. It's a bit like when if you're dating, you're not gonna show up on the first date and make a first impression by, I don't know, talking about your finances or something. You're gonna tell them your most interesting story, which I guess is the hot dog underpants.
I'm going to say, I love your analogy there with dating. I really do, because at the end of the day, it's like, and that's because every product, every brand is a relationship with the consumer, and a relationship. Here's what was my big aha along the way is it's actually a relationship with yourself. People tell themselves, I think it's funny that brands think, oh, well, customers have a relationship with us as the brand. I'm like, no, they don't. I truly don't believe that. I'm like, but they have a relationship with themselves, and you fit into their story.
Yeah,
like,
100%.
And that's an interesting thing is like, I think people forget, like, no, I think about all the time, like you go to the store, there's so many different versions of, my favorite is water. You look at all the water options, there's 15 bottles, and it's like, they're literally saying, this is what I value by choosing one water versus another water versus another water. This is who I believe myself to be. And that happens with every single purchasing decision. And it's not that I don't believe that people can't become part of like a community. I truly believe that brands can foster that sense of connection and everything else. But at the end of the day, when someone purchases or really does anything, it's a self-expression of who they either believe themselves to be or who they believe they're becoming. And
that's 100% true. And I think the sooner that any brand leader can accept that the consumer doesn't really care about them, that is a fantastic starting point. There's been, I can't remember who came out with this famous literature on it, but like the starting point is indifference, and you have the sooner you get there, the better for you, right? Because then you start thinking about what the values are. Now, I would say, like, I use the dating analogy all the time. It's such a helpful one, because I think if a brand, think about if your brand was someone in a bar standing there just shouting and making noise and talking about themselves obnoxiously, there's probably going to be this blast radius around them of people that are avoiding them.
Yep.
And pretty much like that. Whereas I think if you sort of look like you're having fun and are interacting with people, it's kind of attractive. I think it's really almost the identical psychology that brands should. But on the values point, I mean, I've got to talk about your last podcast with Preston from Chubby's. I think it was so interesting, because he's a guy who instinctively, I think, got it and gets it, whereas he never studied it. And it was so interesting that, after his 9-figure exit, he kind of went in and then started studying marketing. I thought it was really funny. And it's almost like he instinctively knew how to connect with people through the marketing and didn't really have to think about it too much. And I think that's a bit like the values thing you're talking about, because consumers don't spend like most people don't spend the day, or at least in the grocery aisle, thinking about what their values are. And if your like ketchup bottle is communicating the same value, like that's not a process that goes through people's heads. But it's all happening subconsciously. And I think it's just the same as just in real life. And it comes back to that human thing, is that you can just feel if someone or a brand is for you. And it's not necessarily just through the packaging. It might be, reinforced by 3 months worth of, somebody marketing to you as a future demand consumer, but the whole package is there and you feel something. And that's ultimately the goal that we have as brands, is to connect people. And it is values, but it's not a conscious values based sort of rationalization, I think.
Man, I love that you said that, because I think I had dinner with a friend last night, and he has a startup, it's doing well.
Yeah.
And he was showing me customer research data, where he was basically like, hey, check out these surveys that they filled out, what they're telling us. And this is how we matter to them. And I was like, hey, I'm not going to tell you those things don't matter. They do, but I need you to understand that no one's consciously thinking about the thing that's even deeper than that. Like the true deep it, like, because no one's, I see this with so many brands where it's like they take the simplest functional benefit and people will tell you that that's the reason, because they're not, to your point, they're not even aware of this sort of like deeper, whether it's sometimes it's a deeper insecurity, sometimes it's a deeper desire, sometimes it's a deeper whatever that they're not even consciously aware of. And to your point, I think great marketers have they kind of have you use the word like instinct, which I totally agree with. It's like, and you have that. I just, from our multiple conversations where it's like, there's a lot that it could be, but it's like, no, push that aside, because that's not the real reason. And you just keep drilling until you get it. And that's part of what makes, like, going back to point one around, marketing is about understanding people. It's that simple. And yet that's what makes it hard. It is this functional reality of like, people don't know themselves. People truly don't know themselves.
Humans are unpredictable and irrational. And it's just a truth of life. So when you put them in a research environment, I'm not shitting on research, right? Research is a good thing. I prefer watching and studying what people have done after they've done it, rather than asking people what they might do. I think it's more interesting and more valuable. But if you put someone in an environment that's unnatural, whether that's a focus group or they're answering 30 questions, they're not in an environment where that's real. So they're not bringing human, like, real natural emotions out. They're being asked to kind of immediately overthink something.
Yeah.
So I think, and I think a lot of your audience will agree that, research is a way of ass covering sometimes, and it's a way of, if you have enough data to prove something, you can probably keep your job for another 3 months and just kick something down the road. But what that means, I think, is that the ultimate work that comes out of it kind of regresses to the mean. It just sort of becomes safe, and safety is the enemy of. I mean, we have to have a liquid death reference in here, I'm sure.
Yes. Would it be a podcast on marketing without a liquid death reference?
Has that come out this week? I don't know. Well, maybe that's. But that's the Captain Obvious example of it would have, and probably did horribly in research, but Mike, who I don't know personally, I feel like he's a kindred spirit. He's much more successful than I am. I think he knew that. He just knew he had a big idea, and he just went for it. And if you ask people whether liquid death is a good idea for a premium water, the rational answer is no. Right. So just don't ask people if you have it. If you have it in your gut, you go for it. And I think that's you can then validate. You can then watch people's behavior to evaluate whether something is hot. But
man, you nailed that. I mean, that's like asking someone, would you pay $200 for a T-shirt on it because it has the word Supreme? People would be like, people are gonna be like, hell no. And then it's like, but turns out the answer is yes.
Okay, so another example. This is one of my favorite examples. Rory Sutherland is a guy in London who's famous sort of ad man. Ogilvy.
Are you going to talk about the book Alchemy?
I'm not. I haven't read his book.
It's fantastic.
I'm sure it's incredible. I feel like I have heard it through various.
Oh my gosh!
But his champagne. So if you ask people whether, so rationally, English sparkling wine is more or less identical to champagne in intrinsically, right? Because I mean, climate change has finally reached the south of England, so that the earth and the soil is actually more or less exactly the same as the soil down in Champagne in the south of France. But if you ask somebody rationally, like, well, and they understood that they were the same thing, champagne from France and English sparkling wine, these two are exactly the same, taste fantastic. The consumer will say, yeah, great. Well, I would pay $20 for an English sparkling wine, £20, and save £20 because it's 40 for a champagne. But what are they going to do if they're going to a celebration or party or hosting? If champagne was half the price, they would sell half as much.
Yep.
It's not about the rational quality price ratio. There is so much more to it, and people are irrational.
Yeah.
And it just goes to show you can do research, but then you've got to like look out into the world and think about what humans are going to do because of need states. I think you're talking about these like deep rooted need states that exist, whether we like it or not. Yeah,
well,
so
here's what I'll say is it's on my top 5 books of the last 2 years in the marketing realm is his book on alchemy. It's absolutely fantastic. And to your point, you are a kindred spirit. Half of the things that you bring up are right there in the book, in terms of just how he perceives and thinks about the world and the things that are irrationally rational. He talks a lot about the psychological and how one of my favorite points he makes is he talks about the fact that basically all decisions are emotional. We make a decision and then we use rationalization or logic to fill in the blank on why we ended up making the decision. And he was basically saying that, which I totally agree with, we have the almost like the president version of our mind, which like takes executive action in order. And then we have the press secretary version of our mind that like is explaining why we made our decisions to other people. But it's like fascinating. I will say one of the things that I've seen work for brands is helping people develop that story for themselves. Helping once they've made that purchasing decision, helping to fill in, well, here's all the reasons why this was a good decision, and providing that story to people actually helps a lot for 2 reasons. I think most people think it helps because it makes you feel good about yourself, the self-expressive benefit of like, yeah, this is all the reasons why. But it also gives them a talk track for when they go and use word of mouth to be able to explain why something resonated with them. And those 2 things are incredibly powerful. And I think a lot of brands, like they're like, once the purchase is made, they're like, my job is done here. And I'm like, well, that's the opportunity is evangelism. The opportunity is providing people that story because that's just the beginning of them rationalizing the decision they made.
So people will, if people fall in love with your brand, they will post-rationalize the purchase and find something rational in there that they can hang their hat on. And there are some incredible examples of this. So in a past life, I was heading up Grey Goose. And this was at a time, that there was a lot of competition in the vodka category in the US. Of course, Tito's was on the rise. And, functionally, vodkas aren't that different, but Grey Goose is pretty different. It is made from a certain, strain of wheat that you find in France. But people just didn't like the brand that much anymore at that time, right? So that was one of the big challenges I had to work on, was obviously driving brand relevance, and we did a lot of work on that. But we found that people wanted to like Tito's more at the time. They just felt closer to it. It was the Americana thing. And then the post-rational argument was that it's gluten-free. All right. And credit to Tito's for saying it on repeat. There's a good learning there. Just say one thing on repeat for a long time and it will stick. But all vodkas are gluten-free. So we were trying, we're like, well, that's crazy. Like Grey Goose is gluten-free too, but people didn't want to hear it. You want to hear what you want to hear if you like a brand, if you feel... And that mimics human behavior. I mean, you kind of want to like people, even if rationally they might not be the right thing for you.
Totally.
It's so interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
I see those things. The 2 places where I see that play out over and over again is in politics and in team sports. Meaning, like, a rational person will sit there and be like, I love my football team, and truly feel like, if they like give the other starting quarterback a concussion in this game, I'd totally be fine with that if that means we win and advance. And it's like, this person's done nothing wrong other than just be on another arbitrary team from another city. And people feel a sense of like us versus them, like wanting to consume again, like what it is that makes them feel justified in their fandom or in their value set. I mean, I see it a lot. Obviously, I see a lot in politics, and something that I find myself doing so much is working so hard. Like one of the things that I do that actually I've never admitted out loud is I go to like 4 different news websites every week to read the headlines of the news. And I don't, the only reason I do that is because I'm like so curious to understand humans, because I'm like, okay, it's so easy to live in this bubble, and you start realizing like people love to consume the things that validate their thoughts and opinions. And I'm not, and that doesn't make me a better person. I'm selfishly doing it because I'm like, I want to understand the MSNBC person, the Fox News person, the CNN person, or the person who's just on Twitter and will never go to a news site in their life. I want to understand, what are they clicking on? Like, what's getting their attention? And that does have an impact, obviously, in marketing, but man, is it fascinating.
You're a very curious guy, because there aren't many people that read both. I think that's awesome. I think there should be more of that.
Well, and I got to tell you, it's really not that constructive, because you realize how crazy all of it is. It's like you go to one site and they're like, here's why Trump will destroy the world. And then you go over here, it's like, here's why Biden's destroying the world. And you're like, oh God, like it's just, it's literally that. It's literally that. They don't even try to like,
but it's just belonging is one of the most fundamental needs. And it comes, I think, what you're describing is, people, they need to belong to a group, I mean, didn't Jeff Bezos say, that if you're the village truth teller, you get clubbed to death, right? So you just, you have to belong to a safe environment. That literally is a survival instinct.
Another book, by the way, The Status Game. It's literally about that. It's like the most important piece of survival. Like the worst thing you could do, a guaranteed death, is being outcast or being in solitary confinement. Like belonging is the strongest. It's even more than food and water. It's the strongest human need. That's
and we're living in a world where it's very, very easy to get funneled down a way of thinking. It literally is placed in front of us every day. It's quite scary.
Yeah, especially on like a TikTok or whatever. It's like you search one thing and it just pummels you with information on that topic. It's just crazy.
I made my first TikTok purchase at 3 a.m. The other night. It was
What'd you buy?
In fact, this little standing desk on wheels that goes down. You can wheel it around the house and take a call wherever, and half price. So that was it showed up, and my wife was like, "Why? We have like 9 workspaces in this house. Why have you?" I was like, "What? I don't know why I bought this."
So I had my first purchase. At least these are more functional. My first purchase was a hat that just said "God's silliest goose," and that's what I bought off of TikTok Shop. And I put it on, and my wife looked at me and she's like, "That is so dumb. Please never wear that in front of me, around me, anyone we know." And
did that make
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It was like when you sent me the Pooptopia shirt, and she's like, "Will you please not wear the poop shirt?" The only 2 things she's ever asked me not to wear is the poop shirt you sent me and that God's silliest goose hat.
That might need some explanation.
No context necessary. Just Google Pooptopia, and you'll learn. Well, the serious note on that is that I wore that hat out like expecting to make someone smile. That was like kind of my goal. I was like, it's fun. No one smiled. I've only worn the hat like twice now. No one liked the hat. I thought it was great. I thought it's the ultimate dad joke.
Well, so I bought this hat, which is just a luggage brand that I think is cool. And
it says Floyd, for those of you that can't see it. Floyd.
I think it's a cool hat. But then as soon as I put it on, my wife was like, "Why are you wearing a Finding Nemo hat?" And then ruined it. Again, they know how to bring us down, do they? They're down a peg.
Oh, man. For what it's worth, I just assumed you were a huge Finding Nemo fan, and I was down with it. So here we are.
That isn't. I watched that in college, and it's on my top 5 list.
Now that we've both divulged our first TikTok Shop purchase, which neither one of those were incredibly inspiring, though you're actually using yours currently, this last topic is one that I thought you'd have some interesting thoughts around, just from conversations we had in the past, which is the idea of, I spent a lot of time, to your point, almost like Preston, to your point, looking back on like, wait, why does this work? We at Raindrop have made a lot of funny ads. It's not the only type of ads we made, but we made a lot of funny ads. But then if you start paying attention, you're like, why are all insurance ads funny, or at least try to be funny? Why are all the like iconic beer ads outside of maybe the Clydesdales, like, why are they funny? Why is Budweiser, Dilly Dilly, whatever? It's like, what is it about humor and ads that just it's part of it. I feel like it's connected to everything we've talked about today, from
Yes,
understanding
yes.
people to everything else. What are your thoughts on that? Because I know that I think you're a funny guy. I know you've done
Thanks.
funny advertising before. So yeah, talk to me.
Well, you know, it's weird. I actually don't know why insurance ads are funny, specifically. Is it because insurance is so boring that they just have no choice but to use humor? It could be that, but the thing I would say is it's almost a risk now not to use humor in your advertising and perhaps throughout your brand. And that doesn't mean that more people are doing it. In fact, I think fewer brands are doing it, which I think is connected to just less risk taking in general in marketing and in corporations. But the brands, it's so simple. And again, coming back to Preston Chubby's guy, like, he knew it. He said it perfectly. He said that you have to be more entertaining, or as entertaining as the funniest stuff on the internet for anyone to notice you. So that's just the simple starting point. Again, it's like, well, why is someone going to engage with your branded content if they have like perfectly targeted, hilarious videos coming at them from all angles? And so, the brands getting high levels of engagement, virality, are the ones that are entertaining people. That is just the truth. And there's just no debate around that. Well, I will say, like, the insurance example, like, you immediately think of, I guess I thought of Geico, which is sort of weird. And, they're using a lizard, which sometimes it's funny and sometimes it's just kind of odd. But
lizard, the caveman. Yeah.
Why is it British? I don't know.
Oh, what do you mean? Why is it British?
We know the answer to that.
Because at the end of the day, I attribute 80% of why I think you're so brilliant and smart around marketing and branding to your actual knowledge base, and 20% is definitely the icing on the cake accent. I mean,
I thought you were going to say 80%. I would flip it. It's probably 80%.
No. I think you know your stuff, but I will say I'm just like, speaking of, I don't know why all these Disney movies are coming up, but like Abu, the monkey, when he's looking at the ruby in the cave. That's a throwback moment in Aladdin. But I'm like Abu when you talk, like you're like my ruby diamond. I'm like, oh, just keep talking, Tom. Oh my gosh,
that is such a specific reference. And
I found it. You're my Abu, you're my ruby, and I am your Abu.
Oh, thank you. I'm your shining red object.
Yeah, rubies.
Pretty accurate. But like, all right, I'm going to come back to the lizard. So it's not. So there's humor, which I think can be, I think there are brands like Bird Dogs and doing really funny stuff.
Yeah.
But, the Geico lizard is a very strategic, long-term use of a distinctive asset. Like, they're not fooling around. Like, the amount that they're spending on those campaigns.
Right.
It's been around. How long has it been around? I mean, maybe a decade. I'm not sure.
Decade, yeah. Plus.
But then there was a British example called the company called Compare the Market. So just one of these price comparison websites. This was probably 20 years ago. They were all popping up. And then comparethemarket.com launched with meerkats. So they were like, compare the meerkat. And their advertising was literally meerkat comparison. And everyone's like, what? Like, what is this, right? But then there was a jingle. They kept going with it. And then what happened? Which comparison website had, by a country mile, the highest levels of unaided recall in the category? It was
meerkats.
But it just blew everybody away.
Yep.
So it's humor, but it's also very strategic. And if it can be a little weird, I think you've got a winning mix. But there's just not that many companies willing to do it. I think I've talked to you about this before. Which is like, and you guys do this. But if a team of people working on brand building is genuinely having fun together, then the work, I think, is guaranteed to be noticed. I think if they're not having fun, which is sadly most creative development processes becomes a little bit tricky, then I think it's almost guaranteed not to perform. I think if people are not enjoying it, then it'll get ignored. The work will get ignored, probably. That's the most likely out. Best case, you might get passively consumed with pretty low engagement. It might be quite forgettable, quite boring, but maybe you'll get some clicks and when the marketer keeps his or her job for 3 months, let's move on. And, if you're lucky, some people might hate it and talk about it.
Right.
If you're not having fun developing the work, forget it.
Totally.
So, but like, that's the hack, isn't it? But isn't that so difficult to, coming back to the whole, it's a simple concept, but it's actually in our lives and in our professional lives, it's quite difficult. just with all
Yeah.
of the swirling mess that we have to deal with.
I mean, you're totally right. I think joy and compliments will fuel a creative team to do things that you could never imagine possible, right? It's true. It's not the size of the client. It doesn't matter how much people are paying. It's like if you can bring a sense of, allowing people to thrive and flourish and take those risks even when they might not hit, it makes all the difference. I think two reflections I'd have on humor and advertising as well is that I think humor genuinely gives people something in the process of advertising, which usually you're not giving people something, whether it's a smile, it's a moment of joy, it's a chuckle, it's a whatever. I think that's ultimately, it's like no one's like, yes, I got served an ad. But when you can actually reverse that out and they're like, I actually like that ad. That's why like the work we've done for Native over the last couple of years, obviously Dr. Squatch, these Manscaped, like these ads where people like
laundry
sauce. They're like, oh my gosh, I want to share this ad. I want to find it. Like the number of comments that we have of people like, oh, I had to come find this ad I saw and I wanted to share it with somebody, right?
People looking for your advertising.
Looking for the advertisement, right.
Yeah. They're trying to cut through the funny social media.
Yeah.
And they're trying to find you.
Yeah. And I'm like, and so when you start realizing like, okay, that's an interesting bar. And then the other thing I will say that is fascinating is I think that there's a point where you start to realize that one of the most valuable things that you can sell is a little bit of joy. And it's a weird thing to put it that way, but I think about Dr. Squatch, which comes to mind, because that was such the before and after. It was like before we started working with them, it was very functional. Here's how it improves your skin. Here's the skin conditions it helps clear.
Oh, really? But
it was
pushing,
the founder has all these skin conditions, and that was his why. Like it was very important to him. Yeah, it was like, this is better for people. They need to know it. And I was like, yes. Like, so that's all true, but it was when people started to go, I smile just looking at the bar of soap, smelling the bar of soap. It makes me, it reminds me of the funny commercials in those moments and your poor balls all dry, empty, and sad, and you're mommy's little boy using mommy's soap, or you're not a dish, you're a man. Like those type of things literally make people chuckle. And I just realized like, all we're doing is providing joy in a mundane space. Same thing with laundry sauce. It's like, doing laundry is not, it's a chore, it's not fun, but laundry sauce provides a little bit of joy in a very mundane experience. And then the question then becomes, how much is joy worth in a mundane experience? Not how much is soap worth. It's like, well, how much is joy worth? Options are no joy or joy. And then you go, life's too short not to have joy. I'll pay a premium to have a little joy. And you do. Like these products are things that bring people joy.
I think that's it's such a good distillation of what we do. And the thing about Dr. Squatch is it is all of that, but the marketing strategy has also been done and is being executed. So there's a huge market for men who, look like they live in a forest, but don't know how to start a campfire. And they're looking to find a little bit of that carnal kind of like come back to some tiny bit of masculinity that might have existed in their life. And that works too. So there's a very real strategy behind it, and the product's great, but without that spark of joy, I think you're nowhere. And it's just it's a value exchange. Whereas if you're advertising to someone and trying to sell them something, it's not really a value exchange. You're just kind of receiving information. Is that going to add? I mean, you're like, okay, I now know that, that toilet paper brand might be softer than that one. Like, okay, but that hasn't really changed the trajectory of my evening particularly.
Yeah.
I didn't
to your point.
Smile, like, so yeah, I love that.
You want the package with the bears on it.
Right. Maybe, yeah. From a big company. Good Wipes was an example of what you're talking about too, right? It was like, a very sterile kind of space that had always done the same thing. And then, this is I can't take all the credit for it at all. They were doing it long before I joined, but it was just to kind of tackle the taboo head on, particularly with women. And there was this realization that, you don't have to tiptoe around this subject, and women are happy to lean in and have fun with this. And everybody goes to the restroom, guys. It's okay.
I thought you were going to say everybody poops, which is accurate as well.
I've lost my edge because I've been there.
You're like everyone. You're all like over here, like, well, everyone uses the restroom.
Everybody goes to the loo.
We get to go to the Louvre.
Yeah.
From time to time, we defecate as humans. I was like, oh my
That's right.
gosh.
Right, from time to time. Yeah. I need to spend some more time with those guys to bring the rudeness back.
Well, as you just heard, we have an unofficial sponsor for this podcast, Geico. You're welcome for the free advertising, though you earned it through great advertising over the years. If you enjoyed this conversation on marketing and branding that people love, I invite you to subscribe and to follow along and check out the previous 2 episodes in this series that really dive into topics that are around brand and can change the game for your business or businesses that you may be in charge of. So follow along, and until next time, I'm Jacques Spitzer, signing off.